welcome to Ecoholics. Today we are going to understand another important concept which is known as Schaefer's model. Schaefer's model or Gordon-Schaefer's model is a model which is prepared for the carrying capacity and to understand the productivity of fisheries, and it's a very core environmental economics concept and growth model. So let's understand what has Gordon-Schaefer told about in this model by Schaefer. We are talking about Gordon-Schaefer, and his model is based on the principles of environmental economics. This particular model is typically based on the fisheries. Now, why are we learning about this model? Gordon-Schaefer's model of fisheries talks about the bioeconomics of fisheries. We know that fisheries are the aquatic life that are very integral to our economic prosperity, and even it's our responsibility to protect this aquatic marine life, and which is why it's a bioeconomic model. Not just biologically we require fisheries to exist sustainably, but we also want to earn revenue out of it. So, which is why it's a complete integration of biological aspects and economical aspects. This is why this model is very important. Now, this model is basically for the open access resource. Open access resource. In environmental economics, we know that an open access resource is basically the resource which has no limitation to use. Unlimited ways in which an open access resource can be utilized and exhausted is a fundamental aspect of open access resource. Now, this model is a bioeconomic model. Bioeconomic model which takes into consideration the carrying capacity of the planet for the fisheries. Now, what is carrying capacity? So, to understand that, let's understand this with a simple diagram. Let's say that we have over time we have growth of population of fish. So on the y-axis, let's say we take fish, okay, and on the x-axis we have taken time. Now, this is a very basic diagram. This is not a very graphical diagram, and it's only used for explanation. So So now here what we'll do is we'll say that initially when the time was started, initially at 0 time there'll be 0 fish, because the biological clock will take some time for the fisheries to increase, right? So let's say it starts from 0 and then it has a curve and then again a flatter curve. So here we start with less fish. Gradually the fish increase. Okay, fisheries increase, reason being that gradually with the reproduction of fisheries in their aquatic marine life, gradually it will start, the momentum will start to take up. Then there'll be a patch where there'll be growth, and it will be a great growth for fisheries, because probably the fisheries are not going to be touched and there'll be no exploitation or exhaustion of the fisheries. They can grow freely. Okay, in that state the fish grow. And then gradually we have a slump or a flat curve, which basically tells that the birth rate and the death rate of the fish becomes equal, and it will be like a flatter curve. Now, what we actually say is that this point for any living organism, such growth of population curve is made, and we understand that what is the carrying capacity of the planet to have those many fish of variety of species. Okay, there is a specific carrying capacity for all the living organisms, because we are all integrated with a food chain, right? So which is why, let's say that there are n number of fish that the planet can hold properly, and that becomes the carrying capacity, right? So that becomes the carrying capacity. Now, with this carrying capacity, if these fisheries are in an open access resource like a pond or like a lake, which can be accessed easily by anyone, there is no exclusion, there is zero exclusion of any person, and which is why anyone can either fishing can take place, or fishing can happen for domestic purpose, fishing can happen for export import. There are people, there are fishermen who are there with fishing nets, just for their luxury. All of these things are happening. And so the carrying capacity can go down, go up, all of these things can happen. And so what we look at from in the Schaefer's model is, with the given carrying capacity of fisheries, what happens, how can we exploit the resources in a very sustainable manner, but also not over exhaust or over exploit them, so that they are at the brink of extinction. That's how we develop this model. And so we have a very simple diagram to depict it. So we are going to depict this diagram. We are going to say that let's say that we have on the x-axis, let's say we have the population of fish. Okay, this is the population of fish, and on the y-axis, what do we have? We have, because we want to understand this model through an economic perspective, so that's why we'll take the revenue that is earned. Okay, revenue, growth. Okay, revenue that is earned by economically utilizing these fish. Okay, so that's what we take on the y-axis. Now, we know that through that previous diagram, we know that there is initially the fish population will be less, then it will start increasing, it will have a nice expansion, and then again it will start to decrease. So with this, what we can draw is a inverted U diagram to replicate the same thing. So over here, let's say we draw such a diagram. Okay, now here we can say that this represents the whole population of fish over time. Here we'll say that there are less fish. Okay, over time the fish will increase, and after a point of time the fish growth will start to decrease over time. Okay, so this place and this place, you'll have less fish, and over the period of time you will have a good amount of fisheries, good growth in the fisheries. Now let's talk about the revenue. So we also say that let's say that the revenue that is earned from these fish is has a positive relationship with the population of the fish. So if there are more fish, more population, then of course the revenue will be good. Okay, revenue will be more. If there are less fish, obviously less population of the fish, तो क्या होगा? Revenue will be low. So which is why this curve also depicts the total revenue that is earned due to the fisheries. Now, because we are talking about the revenue, we also need to talk about the cost. And let's say that if we take every week, we take some cost that is added to catch the fish, okay, which is also called as catches, okay. If you hear the term catches or read the term catches, it basically just means that the number of fish that have been caught for any economic purpose, selling and production and all that, okay. So that's the term catches. So for these catches, what do you need to do? You need to have a certain effort, okay. So this x-axis also represents the amount of effort that has been put to catch the fish or to increase the number of catches. Now usually you will see that initially when the population of the fish was low, even people did not know that this is there's an aquatic life which can be utilized for economic purposes. But gradually when the fish starts to expand in their aquatic marine lives, okay, what will happen? Gradually the people will start to know, okay, this is also a way in which economics can boost for the nation. So let's catch the fish, and for catching the fish, what will they do? They will, so if it's the ocean or if it's the lake or river, whatever, they will start to catch fish more through different boats. So it can be the boats that are involved in catching the fish. There are the number of fishermen who are involved in catching the fish. All of this is also a cost that has been borne to catch the fish, right? It's not like free of cost. So the amount of effort that is given to deploy boats and ships just for these catches, the amount of the size of these boats, all of that will count, okay. So now looking at that, we understand what does effort mean, okay. In the typical Schaefer's diagram, you will also see on the x-axis there's a concept known as effort, okay. So that effort is basically the effort to catch the fish, and which will also designate the costs which are involved, okay. Now, when there is effort and there is cost, the cost will be depicted by a straight line that goes through this total revenue curve, okay. And so it will be something like this, okay. This is how it will cross, and this is the total cost. Now, we know for a fact that the point at which the total cost and total revenue meet, this point will be called as the bioeconomic point, okay. If you look at the population from the population angle, we'll see that there's very less population of fish that can be caught. The effort is really great, okay, for catching this fish, and it will definitely give a very low or negligible return. So which is why the total cost and total revenue here meet, and so this is a point of bioeconomic this is bioeconomic profit or bioeconomic point, which depicts no profit for the fisheries, and typically after this point it will be leading to over-exhaustion of the open access resources. Now there is another important point where the total revenue is greater than the total cost, okay. So here we are not going to measure it typically by an equation. We're just going to understand through the diagram itself that, okay, there's one point where the curvature is huge, and the line over here is also, if I divide it like this, okay, you can see that the total revenue looks more than the total cost. Okay, so where the total revenue is more than total cost, it means that here we can maximize the economic rent. Economic rent is nothing but the profit that is earned by the economics of the fisheries. Okay, so when you maximize the rent, so this point becomes the maximum yield point. Okay, the point at which there is maximum yield, and yield represents not just the production but also the revenue that is earned from these fisheries. Okay, however, there is also another point where the total revenue will be equal to the total cost. Okay, not this point, the point where actually the cost or the effort that is made is equal to the revenue earned. Okay, so let's say that this is that point. Okay, we are just eyeballing on the graph and we are looking at, assuming that this is okay, this is the point at which the total revenue equals the total cost or the effort. Okay, so this point very importantly is called as the maximum sustainable point. Maximum sustainable point. This is the point which Gordon-Schaefer has introduced, and Gordon-Schaefer has said to be that this is the point which is a very, very important point to understand whenever we are looking at any open access resources. Okay, now fisheries are one example of open access resources. There are many other examples of open access resources where this model can be replicated. Gordon-Schaefer has specifically looked at fisheries, because that's something that is economically managed the most, okay, and mismanaged the most. Now, this maximum sustainable point is a very important point, which let's understand. So, we talk about the maximum sustainable point. To understand this point, let's understand it through a simple example. Imagine that there's a huge cliff, okay, and you start walking on the top of the cliff. Now, to enjoy a beautiful scene which is right across the cliff, you will have to go to the topmost point of the cliff, right? The topmost point of the cliff. But this point is a very strategic point, because if you by chance move even slight towards the ground, you will fall, right? So you have to strategically move yourself in such a way that you are over the cliff and on such point that you don't fall, but also take the maximum view over the cliff. Okay, so the maximum sustainable point is exactly like that. This is that point where the biomass of that living organism is increased, okay, or is utilized by maximum. So if I say in economic terms, we exploit the fisheries to the maximum, but by only that much level, so that we are not any step ahead and over-exploit the fisheries and hamper their growth, but we are also not any step back, so that we are not able to enjoy the maximum potential of revenue that we can earn and maximum potential growth that can happen in the economy for the fisheries. This point is also very strategic for the fisheries. Economics perspective you all understood, but what about the fisheries? Maximum sustainable point, because it's sustainable. So maximum sustainable point is also the point where when the fisheries, let's say that the fisheries are at a certain carrying capacity, which means that the birth rate, death rate is equal for the fisheries, and the planet is full with the amount of fisheries. Now, when you economically reduce the fish, or when you catch the fish, or when you exploit the fish, what happens? The point will, there will be a gap between the fish, okay, or the utilization. Let's say that this is the carrying capacity for the fish. From here till here is the carrying capacity. Now, when the fish is exhausted, exploited, let's say now there is this much fish remaining on the planet. So this gap has been created, okay? And this gap is only created when the utilization of fisheries is done on the maximum sustainable point, okay? Not less, not more. This point is useful also for reproduction of fisheries, replenishment of fisheries in the existing aquatic marine life. And this was what Gordon-Schaefer came about in his model. So although his model is a very intricate model given for understanding, and it has some complexities, but this is the easiest way in which you can understand the purpose and the implication of Gordon-Schaefer's model. So I hope this model brings you more knowledge in the field of environmental economics, and we'll keep on bringing such interesting topics to you. Stay tuned to Ecoholics, and for more detailed analysis of other economic models, just download our Ecoholics app. Thank you.